There are some stories that don't just haunt small towns, they echo through every inch of the land where they happened. This one begins like any ordinary road trip, and ends with something investigators could barely speak about. Before we go into today's story, if you love true stories that dive deep into the most chilling unsolved mysteries and forgotten cases, make sure to support the channel by subscribing, liking this video, and turning on the notification bell, so you never miss a story like this again. Now, let's go back to the burning heart of Arizona, where a young couple's dream trip across the desert turned into one of the most disturbing disappearances in the state's history. A story where what searchers discovered days later would change the way locals viewed that stretch of desert forever. It was early June of 2017 when Evan Morales and Jessica Lane, both 29, packed their black Jeep Wrangler and left their apartment in Flagstaff, Arizona. They had been together for nearly 4 years, high school sweethearts turned travel vloggers, known online for exploring abandoned ghost towns and forgotten trails. Jessica, a photographer with an eye for eerie landscapes, had convinced Evan to take a detour into the Sonoran Desert, where she hoped to capture a rare summer storm rolling over the red cliffs. They texted friends saying it would just be a 2-day mini-trip. That text was the last anyone would hear from them. 2 days later, when they missed a scheduled check-in with Jessica's sister, concern began to grow. By the 4th day, both families contacted Coconino County Sheriff's Department, reporting the couple missing. Authorities quickly mobilized a search. Helicopters, drones, local volunteers, even off-road rescue teams were deployed across a vast radius stretching 60 miles of desert. The first clue came on day 5. Their Jeep was found abandoned on a dirt trail, tires half buried in sand, doors locked, and keys still inside. But what truly puzzled investigators wasn't what they found, it was what they didn't. There were no footprints, no sign of a struggle, and no belongings scattered nearby. Even Jessica's camera bag, something she never left behind, was missing. A volunteer rescuer named Ryan Delvecchio later told local media, "It's like they just evaporated. No sign of them heading anywhere. It's like they stepped off the face of the earth." Inside the Jeep, however, officers did find something strange, a hand-drawn map, folded under the passenger seat. The map showed a route leading to an unmarked location, circled in red, labeled only with a single word, Haven. No one could identify what Haven meant. It wasn't a known campground, landmark, or trail. But investigators soon discovered that Evan had recently been researching abandoned Cold War bunkers in the Arizona desert for an upcoming video. And Haven, it seemed, might have been one of them. The following morning, 3 search teams followed the rough direction of the map. Temperatures reached over 105 degrees Fahrenheit, and visibility was low due to dust storms. By afternoon, one team radioed in a disturbing find, a partially buried tent, its fabric shredded by wind, about 6 miles from where the Jeep was located. Inside the tent were 2 things, a tripod and a torn notebook with pages filled with Jessica's handwriting. The last entry, dated June 7th, read simply, "Something's out here. Evan says it's the wind. But it's not the wind. It's circling us." The area was immediately sealed off, and search dogs were brought in. But by nightfall, they picked up nothing. No scent trail, no signs of wildlife, no bodies. The desert was silent, stretching endlessly under the stars. That night, one of the volunteers recorded strange noises echoing across the dunes, rhythmic metallic sounds, almost like doors being slammed in the distance. When investigators analyzed the audio, they couldn't determine the source. And just as hope began to fade, a rescue drone scanning thermal signatures captured something unexpected, a faint heat source nearly 10 miles north of the tent site, near an abandoned military testing ground that had been closed since the 1970s. The coordinates were sent to the nearest ground team. When they arrived the next morning, What they found there would mark the beginning of one of the darkest discoveries in Arizona's history. By dawn, a convoy of search vehicles rolled across the desolate sands toward the coordinates the drone had flagged. The area was part of an old military testing zone, once used in the 1960s for classified experiments, long since fenced off and forgotten. Most maps didn't even mark it anymore. When the lead team, headed by Sergeant Lucas Rayner, reached the site, the air was thick with stillness. The desert wind had died, leaving an unnatural quiet that made every sound, the crunch of boots, the hum of the generator, feel louder than it should. The team split up, moving between the sun-bleached husks of concrete bunkers and rusted towers. Then, about 200 feet from the perimeter fence, one officer called out. He'd found something. Half buried in sand lay a shoe, a tan hiking boot, frayed, caked with dried mud. A few meters away, they found the second boot, this one smaller, with a faded blue stripe Jessica's sister later confirmed was hers. The discovery turned the air electric with dread. Moments later, another officer shouted. Near the foundation of a collapsed bunker entrance, partially concealed by debris, was a camera, Jessica's Nikon D850. Its lens was cracked, but the memory card was still inside. They bagged the camera and radioed it in for forensic retrieval. But curiosity got the better of one deputy, Officer Sloan, who wanted to see if any data could be accessed on site. Against protocol, he powered the camera on. It flickered, and what came up on the small screen made everyone around him go completely silent. The last photo had been taken at 8:47 p.m., the night Jessica's diary mentioned something circling them. The image showed Evan standing in the dark, flashlight aimed toward the horizon, and behind him, faintly illuminated by the light beam, was a silhouette. Not an animal. Not a shadow. A figure, human-shaped, standing motionless in the distance, facing them. When investigators later enhanced the photo, they could see the outline of what looked like a gas mask or some kind of old respirator strapped over the figure's head. Whatever it was, it had been watching them. Authorities widened their search to include the bunker complex, which had long been sealed off after reports of chemical testing decades earlier. Radiation detectors and protective gear were brought in, and a specialized team entered one of the open shafts where heat signatures had been detected the day before. What they found inside made even the most hardened officers back away. The tunnel walls were covered in drawings, crudely etched in soot and ash. Dozens of sketches, spirals, faces, and strange shapes resembling human figures with elongated limbs. Near the far end of the chamber was a makeshift bedroll, a lantern, and half-empty bottles of water labeled in faded military print. But it was what lay beside the bedroll that made every rescuer's stomach twist. A leather-bound journal, its first page signed. Property of Lieutenant H. Callow, Project Haven, 1962. Investigators later confirmed Project Haven had been a classified desert isolation study run by the U.S. Army in the early 1960s, designed to test psychological endurance under extreme conditions. The project had been abandoned after several subjects reportedly went missing, and all related documents were destroyed. But the pages of that journal told a different story. Callow's notes described hearing voices in the sand, seeing figures at night, and watching his team members walk into the dunes and never come back. One line, dated August 1962, sent chills through every agent who read it. If anyone finds this, know that Haven isn't a place. It's a state. Once you see it, it doesn't let you leave. Later that afternoon, forensic teams scanned the perimeter again, this time detecting faint organic matter signals underground near the bunker entrance. Excavation began immediately. 2 hours into digging, the team hit something soft beneath the compacted sand. They unearthed a human hand, skin leathery from desiccation but still intact. The body, once fully exhumed, was confirmed to be Evan Morales. He was found lying face down, arms stretched as if he'd been crawling toward the surface. No external wounds. No sign of trauma. Just sand packed deep inside his lungs. Jessica, however, was nowhere to be found. Her footprints led about 50 yards away from the bunker, and then simply stopped. Like she'd vanished mid-step. A search perimeter was widened again, and over the next 2 days, more than 120 volunteers combed through miles of dunes. They found only one more clue, Jessica's necklace, twisted around a fragment of barbed wire near an old communications tower. Meanwhile, digital forensics recovered the full memory card from Jessica's camera. There were 27 photos taken after the one with the mysterious figure. Most were blurry, nighttime shots, flashlight beams, sandstorms. But the final image was different. It appeared to have been taken inside a dark tunnel, the same bunker they had found Evan in. And in the faint glow of the lantern's light, the camera had captured what looked like multiple faces peering out from the darkness behind Jessica. The faces weren't clear, distorted, streaked with shadow. But they seemed human. And one of them appeared to be wearing the same kind of gas mask seen in the earlier photo. The timestamp on that final image was June 8, 12:23 a.m., 2 hours after Evan was believed to have died. Locals began referring to the place as the Haven Site. Rumors spread that the old military experiments had opened something inhuman beneath the sand, something that didn't want to be disturbed. But official reports stayed silent on that theory. The sheriff's department closed the case with the classification: exposure and dehydration. Secondary disorientation due to environmental factors. Unofficially, though, every searcher who entered that bunker afterward swore the same thing. That when the wind picked up, they could hear voices whispering their names through the tunnels. Weeks had passed since the discovery of Evan Morales's body, but the desert hadn't returned to silence. For residents of Coconino County, the story became an obsession, whispered in coffee shops, argued over on online forums, even turned into short documentaries. Yet one thing remained clear: Jessica Lane was still missing, and nobody could explain how. The sheriff's department insisted the couple succumb to exposure, but many, including the Morales and Lane families, didn't believe that. Not when there were photos showing masked figures and an abandoned military site filled with cryptic warnings. When the case file was leaked online 3 months later, it sparked nationwide outrage and brought attention from an unexpected source. Enter Dr. Olivia Grant, a retired Air Force psychologist who had once worked on post-classified debriefings for Cold War-era experiments. In September 2017, she reached out to Evan's father, claiming she recognized the term Project Haven. Her voice on the call was steady but uneasy. "If what they found in that bunker is real," she said, "then Haven wasn't just a project. It was a containment." Dr. Grant explained that in the late 1950s and early 1960s, several desert testing sites across the U.S. were used not only for weapons but psychological isolation research. The idea was to determine how long the human mind could endure sensory deprivation, heat, and environmental desolation. Most experiments were stopped, except one: a site near the small town of Marble Canyon, Arizona. The same coordinates where Evan and Jessica's tent had been found. Olivia came forward publicly after seeing Jessica's final photo released by the press. She pointed out a chilling detail. The figure in the gas mask was wearing a Hazel 3 respirator, a model issued only to military staff between 1958 and 1964. That mask should have been extinct decades ago. This revelation reignited the investigation. Under pressure, the sheriff's department reopened the case, this time with a joint task force including environmental scientists and forensic analysts. Their first goal: return to the Haven site and uncover what had been sealed off below. On October 4, 2017, a new team arrived, armed with fresh radiation sensors, ground-penetrating radar, and geochemical analyzers. Among them was Deputy Sloan, the same officer who had first powered on Jessica's camera months earlier. He'd become consumed by the case, unable to shake the image of those blurred faces in the final photo. The team descended back into the primary bunker shaft, now reinforced with steel scaffolding to prevent collapse. At first, everything seemed exactly as they'd left it. The etched symbols, the makeshift bedroll, even the journal belonging to Lieutenant Callow. But as they moved deeper, one of the tech operators noticed something strange on the radar, a void beneath the chamber floor, roughly the size of a small room. It wasn't marked on any of the original blueprints recovered from archives. Curiosity overtook fear. They began to dig. After several hours, they broke through a layer of concrete and revealed a sealed steel door hidden beneath. Rust had almost consumed it, but the engraved words were still visible. Project Haven, Chamber 9. The hinges gave way with a metallic scream. A gust of stale, freezing air rushed out. Inside, the flashlight beams revealed a narrow corridor leading to a smaller containment room. And there, standing against the far wall, was another camera, an old 8mm film recorder mounted on a tripod, pointed toward a glass observation chamber. Behind that glass, half-collapsed and coated in white dust, were human remains, 5 skeletons, dressed in decayed military fatigues. Each one wore a Hazel 3 gas mask. At first, it seemed like they had simply died trapped inside. But then Dr. Grant noticed something horrifying, the scratches on the inside of the glass. Hundreds of them. As if the people inside had been trying to claw their way out. And on the metal panel next to the glass was a set of words scratched crudely by hand. Haven failed. Containment breached. They don't belong to time anymore. The old camera was recovered and sent to a state laboratory for restoration. Weeks later, its contents were digitized. 43 minutes of grainy, black-and-white footage dated August 19, 1962. The film showed a group of men in military uniforms inside the same chamber. They appeared to be conducting an experiment, speaking about Phase 3 isolation. At one point, the camera jolted, and the men suddenly looked toward the ceiling, reacting to something unseen. The audio crackled violently before cutting out. But the final minute of the film made every analyst go silent. A static shot showed the men staring at the wall, motionless. Then, as the film degraded, faint dark shapes began to appear, silhouettes that didn't match their shadows. The shapes moved independently, circling the men. And one by one, the soldiers turned their heads, as if looking directly at the camera. The last frame froze on a single image, a soldier pressing his hand against the glass, mouth open in a silent scream. Then darkness. When the footage was shown privately to local officials, Deputy Sloan left the room midway through. He resigned from the department 2 days later. In a recorded statement he gave before leaving town, he said, "Whatever they saw in there, they brought it back with them. And it's still there. Waiting." Jessica's voice. Just when investigators thought the story had reached its end, a new piece of evidence surfaced. A ranger stationed 40 miles from the site reported finding a solar-powered voice recorder buried under a rock formation in December 2017, its casing labeled with Jessica Lane's initials. The recording was faint but intact. It began with Jessica's breathing, fast and uneven, then her whisper. "Evan's gone. I tried to go back, but the sand moves. The tunnel wasn't there this morning. There's something underneath us. It knows when we're close. If anyone finds this, don't open it. Don't look for Haven. It's not a place you find, it's where you end up. The tape ended with static. Authorities never released the full audio. But one agent later admitted off-record that the static wasn't just noise. When played through a spectrogram, it revealed faint, rhythmic frequencies resembling a human voice repeating a single word. Stay. By the start of 2018, the area was permanently sealed off by federal order, citing environmental instability and radiation risk. But locals claim they still see lights in the dunes at night, flickering like old lanterns moving slowly across the horizon. And sometimes, when the wind is right, they swear they can hear faint laughter carried through the canyons. By early March 2018, nearly 9 months after the disappearance of Evan Morales and Jessica Lane, the Arizona desert had returned to its usual stillness. The sheriff's department had closed the investigation again, and the official statement read the same words as before: death by exposure and environmental exhaustion. But the people who had been to the site knew that wasn't the truth. Something had happened out there, something no report could put into words without sounding insane. And then came the final break in the case. A private recovery diver named Caleb Harris, who worked with search and rescue operations in the Southwest, contacted Evan's father in April 2018. He claimed that while doing a drone survey for a geology company near the Painted Desert, roughly 20 miles from the original Haven site, he'd picked up a faint distress signal, a pulsing frequency matching the same bandwidth used by emergency beacons. When the coordinates were verified, the signal was traced to an old storm drain shaft, one not listed on any local maps. Inside, wedged between layers of limestone, was a rusted metal box sealed with bolts. When authorities opened it, they found a USB drive wrapped in plastic. The drive contained one single video file, time-stamped June 8, 2017, 3:42 a.m. It had been recorded on Jessica's phone. The video lasted 1 minute, 51 seconds. The first 30 seconds were black, only Jessica's trembling voice audible. "I can't see him anymore. The light's gone. I keep hearing my name. It's Evan's voice, but it's not him. There's something else down here. I don't think it's human." Then the camera flickered. Jessica's face came into view, streaked with dirt, her eyes reflecting light from her phone screen. Behind her was the unmistakable corridor of the bunker, and faintly, you could see a silhouette in the background. She turned suddenly, whispering, "Who's there?" A scraping sound echoed, metal against metal, and the phone tilted, showing part of the tunnel wall. For a split second, something moved across the frame, a distorted figure, tall and angular, with light reflecting off what looked like glass or a mask. Jessica screamed. The phone hit the ground, the video shaking violently. Then, through the noise, there was a faint male voice. Soft, close to the microphone. "Stay with us, Jessica." The video ended there. When the footage was authenticated, forensic analysts found a detail everyone had missed the first time. The metadata revealed that the phone's GPS signal had been active not underground, but 20 feet beneath the desert floor, directly beneath the first bunker, in an area that, according to blueprints, didn't exist. That's when federal agents quietly stepped in. Within weeks, the entire zone around the Haven site was fenced off, sealed by the Department of Defense, and reclassified as restricted federal property. All rescue operations, research permits, and access requests were permanently denied. But that didn't stop people from talking. 2 years later, in 2020, an anonymous email was sent to several journalists covering unsolved cases in Arizona. It came from a source claiming to be a former DoD subcontractor who worked on the recovery and sealing of the Haven site. The email included 2 attachments, a declassified memo and a blurred image. The memo, dated September 1962, was marked top secret and titled, "Containment Breach, Subject 9. The memo's text described an experiment involving sensory isolation and auditory deprivation performed on 5 test subjects. But during the second week, all 5 subjects began hearing voices that spoke in their own tone, followed by hallucinations of shadow entities that mirrored their movements. The final line of the document read, "Upon exposure, cognitive identity disassociates from corporeal form. Recommend full-site quarantine and indefinite closure." The blurred image attached showed the same chamber discovered in 2017, but this time the glass containment unit was full, not of bodies, but of a swirling black mass, reflecting faint outlines of human faces. Dr. Olivia Grant, who had been quietly gathering evidence on her own since the case reopened, noticed something no one else did. The final metadata coordinates from Jessica's phone matched the exact center of where the containment breach had occurred in 1962. That meant Jessica, whether alive or not, had somehow reached the core of the original experiment. And the strange voices that both the 1962 soldiers and Jessica described hearing weren't hallucinations. They were recordings, echoes trapped within electromagnetic fields caused by the old experimental chambers. In short, the site had become an amplifier, repeating the final moments of anyone who had ever entered. Their voices and energy, permanently looping in time. That would explain why searchers later reported hearing their own names whispered back. And why, on stormy nights, heat signatures still appear beneath the dunes, flickering like moving people. In 2021, a journalist named Lance Robards managed to sneak into the sealed Haven perimeter. He filmed for 20 minutes before his camera died unexpectedly. His footage was uploaded anonymously online months later under the title, Inside Project Haven. Most of it showed what you'd expect: decaying bunkers, sand-filled hallways, old metal signage. But in the last 30 seconds, the camera pointed toward an open shaft. And faintly visible in the darkness below was a small patch of fabric, denim, with a silver zipper glinting in the light. It was the same brand of jeans Jessica had been wearing the day she vanished. The video ended abruptly after that, the camera jolting as if something had struck it. Lance was never located. To this day, the Haven site remains sealed. No official acknowledgement has ever been made by the U.S. government regarding Project Haven or the Morales Lane disappearance. But hikers and travelers who venture too close to that stretch of desert near Marble Canyon still report strange things. Phones lose signal. Compasses spin erratically. And sometimes, just as the sun sets, people claim to see a man and a woman walking together in the distance, disappearing whenever anyone approaches. Locals say that's Evan and Jessica, still trying to find their way home. Others believe it's something else wearing their shapes, drawing in anyone foolish enough to follow. Whatever the truth is, one thing's certain: the desert keeps its secrets buried deep. And sometimes, it buries the people who try to uncover them